Welcome to Societal Shapers, a podcast by PL Kadila, the place to get inspired, find your purpose and courage, and get tools to become the next female leader, creating real results and meaningful changes.
So thank you everybody for making it on time. Very excited to have you all here. And before we get into the webinar or the content of the webinar, which is on future skills, hacks and opportunities, I'll introduce a bit about myself. And I think, the biggest takeaway that I want everybody to leave this webinar with is not to just think about making money, and also the future skills that I'm going to be talking about, but also on the areas of sustainability. So this theme would be embedded throughout the presentation. So hope you guys will get something out of this. So a little bit of background on myself. So I'm currently the head of operations for a Pan-Asian think tank called the Global Institute for Tomorrow. But as a passion or like a side thing, which I am very, very passionate about, I have kind of positioned myself as a public sector women empowerment coach, because I believe that there is a lack, particularly women, in the public sector space or in politics, especially in Malaysia. So the idea is, how can we find young female talent, not just in Malaysia, but across the region, help, support, guide, and empower them so that then they will find the confidence, find their purpose, and be able to then create results and impact in the future. So essentially, that's the purpose of these coming webinars that I'm going to be running. And I've also launched a podcast called Societal Shapers. And basically, Societal Shapers covers everybody who is interested in shaping our future society and how that would look like. And I hope, all of you who are part of this webinar, learning to understand what are the future skills, will also take part in this movement. So that's a little bit about myself. Okay, so we're going to go into the details of the first session of the presentation. I'm covering 3 areas. So the first is actually digital and technical skills, which we will cover more on virtual assistants, digital nomads, remote workers. So this first 3 is not something that's alien. Everybody's kind of heard about it before, but what are the areas within this, and why is it that I recommend people, have a go or give it a hand in terms of learning some new skills? This is because I feel that the future is going to be digital. The future is going to be about technology as well. So it's good from now, especially people who work in the professional, work in MNCs or PLCs, and they should kind of get their feet dirty a bit or get their feet wet so that they can understand and learn a bit about the skills. So on virtual, then after we've gone through these first 3 parts, my husband is going to start talking about robotics process automation. So the future is also automation. Lots of jobs that's going to be lost today will be because of robotics, automation, and AI as we all know it. So he will give a bit more details into what that future would look like and who would like to be able to learn more about it and how do you do that. And then the final one is basically the future trends of where I believe future industries and businesses will be. And they're all really, the information is kind of laid out in front of us, and they're all related to the UN 17 Sustainable Developmental Goals. And I'll explain a bit more about that later as well. So now moving into virtual assistants. So what is this as a profession, right? So virtual assistants is not that big in Malaysia, but it is actually quite big in the Philippines, for example. It's really big in India, for example, because a lot of people work remotely and they work virtually. And this covers skills, for example, like graphic designing, copywriting, technical assistance. So for example, right now, as I mentioned earlier, I used Zoom to connect it to Facebook Live, and I'm also recording at the same time. And then after I'm done, I'm going to take this recording and I'm going to cut it into pieces, put it into a podcast, put it into YouTube. So all that is like the technical stuff that happens within the software. So people can actually learn these different applications online and then they can connect the dots. So for somebody like me who's in the coaching space, for example, I need someone to help me with the technical stuff that happens behind all these connections that people don't actually see. So that's why, in this webinar that I have my virtual assistant, Rochelle Rivera. So she's from the Philippines. So she's helping me a lot with a lot of the tech stuff, helping me create Google feedback forms. So that's some of the role that she does as a virtual assistant. So you can either be a specialist or you can be a generalist. And then the other ones, which include social media management. So you have a lot of people now also looking into helping out influencers, helping managing celebrities' accounts, etc. So all that are areas where you can actually make money and work from home. So it might not be as fulfilling as how other jobs would probably be, but just getting our hands involved in this little technical stuff, it will make us more used to online software, online programming, and therefore this can be like the foundational skills. Then next, coaching. So the coaching industry today is, I would say, pretty satiated, but at the same time, there is a huge opportunity for coaching, and there's all sorts of coach. I ventured into coaching maybe a few years ago, and at this time the coaching industry was still just about to boom, especially in Europe and the US. But in Asia, it hasn't really picked up because people are not so used to paying for services. But eventually, this will pick up as we become a more developed economy. This kind of services will start to pick up. So if you're interested, or if you think about your skill and your strengths, what are they? If they fall within the remit of coaching, this could be something that you want to look into, right? Then next, as a researcher, or even creating PowerPoint presentations, for example. So these are like the very little detail of kinds of specialty that you can specialize in, and then put yourself out in platforms like Upwork or Fiverr. And in Malaysia, there's an equivalent of Fiverr called Bantu. So Bantu, basically, it's an aggregator of similar to virtual assistants or people who want to help people in tech. So there's a lot of startups within this region. So you can also promote your services on Bantu or Fiverr, etc. And then finally, content creation is something that's huge, right? So everyone wants to put themselves out there, but they don't know what to say. They don't know how to create content for themselves. So this is something that requires a lot of ideas and a lot of thinking. And so, usually as a person who's working at home alone, it is quite tough to come up with different ideas. So it's good to actually work with some other friends or some new people that you meet, come together, create a group and say, let's brainstorm about certain content for a specific industry or specific topic, right? So you might have shared passion, shared interest, and this will be really useful. And then you can promote yourself as a group, offering this service to help people create content. And I think today, as we can see, the industries that are suffering the most, we would say probably, it would be retail and F&B. And a lot of traditional F&B and retail businesses, especially small, medium businesses, all of a sudden, from having a physical store, having customers walk in, and then now they have to transfer everything online. And, this sudden transformation requires them to quickly put together an online presence. So where can we help them, right? Where can we not just from a website creation, but how can we help them create content? How can we help them to stand out from the crowd? So this is it, right? What I really want to spend time more on is also about branding. It's also about understanding, how can you differentiate yourself and create a little blue ocean strategy for yourself. And so, when we talk about the how, we really need to think about these three areas, which I think, is the most important part that we need to think about, which is branding, values, and quality. So I cannot stress enough. So branding is definitely something which is really important. And I think, one of the participants here, Nash, she is actually part of my branding coach, and I'm part of her branding mastermind. And she talks a lot about branding. And it's so important to be able to identify your voice, identify, what your values are, and then putting it out there, because the currency of the future is no longer about it's no longer just about money, right? It's no longer transactional. It is based on trust. So I will purchase from you, I will support you if I can trust you, if I know you're a real person, if you and I share the same values. So I think, businesses in the future will move towards that way as well, in terms of human connections and interaction. So you need to build this persona. That's why people talk about personal branding all the time and the importance of personal branding. And my third point is really on quality. So what I find is, when you're a freelancer, and when you work for yourself, or when you're a digital nomad, so you're typically by yourself or maybe with a small group, and it is so easy to compromise or corrode your quality level. So this is something which you have to demand from yourself constantly. This is something which you have to not just benchmark yourself, you have to benchmark yourself against other people and understand what is the standard that we need to uphold ourselves to. So even when it comes to, when I spoke about virtual assistants, so like how virtual assistants like Roche, for example, she goes by a certain amount per hour, right? A certain amount of US dollars, so maybe $10, $15, $20, $25. So how do you really put this marker on your rate? So it would depend on your experience, it would depend on the quality of your work, it would depend on the standards and what your deliverables are. And so this is a very, very, very important thing, which a lot of entrepreneurs tend to forget about the quality of their work, but get so involved in wanting to market themselves, so involved in wanting to get money, that they actually compromise on their quality. So on top of being able to learn all these new skill sets, being able to put yourself out there with these new skill sets to make money, you must always remember not to compromise on quality. And therefore, I'm going to finish this part with saying that there is, it's not moving. Okay. That there is no substitute for hard work, perseverance, and lifelong learning. So one of the reasons why I want, those of you who've attended this webinar, and you might have your reasons for attending this webinar, we've put together about 2 pages resources where you can actually have free video tutorials where you can learn more about virtual assistants. You can learn more about the technical stuff which I've shared, and that's courtesy of Roche. So Roche has made a lot of videos because she owns a virtual assistant academy back in the Philippines, and so you can just use these free resources to learn on how to do simple things on Facebook, how to create the different online platforms to help others that needs these services. So the point is, you don't need tens and thousands of dollars, right, to basically have like a paper qualification or an MBA, because this process alone, being able to get your hands dirty and learning a new technical skill, is in a way like a mini MBA, right? Being able to learn a new skill, then being able to market your skills, and then being able to put a price on your skill, and then being able to make a sales, be able to collect leads, be able to generate leads. So all this on its own is already like a mini MBA. So you don't really have to even like pay for a really expensive MBA to learn all of these skills. And during the process, you will have your ups and downs, you will have failures, you will have limitations, you will have, there'll be blocks and all that. And all this is like the best time to basically nurture and hone your soft skills. So the future skills that's needed is not really a technical skill, but it's really about leadership and soft skills. So that's basically the point that I wanted to make, right? So people talk about, when I'm hiring a talent within the professional industry, I'm always looking for not somebody who's necessarily like great on paper, right? They've got like A's and degrees and masters and PhDs, but it's also about their soft skills, which is their critical thinking, their analytical thinking, their conceptual thinking, their ability to adapt, be flexible, the resiliency. So all these soft skills is something that young people have some or don't have at all, right? So some of these challenges also stems from the middle class disease, which I call basically laziness, because everything's done for you. So you're not able to learn all of this stuff. And the things, the conversations that we talk about today that's on social media, that covers and it's peppered through our publications, is all not deep stuff, right? It's very like surface level stuff. It's about gossip here. It's about, for example, the women ministry, talking about this are very shallow and surface stuff. So we need to be able to understand at a deeper level, how are we able to then promote and nurture our own critical thinking skills, because we're not getting it from our education. So, Nur Zabidi, for example, you look very young, and you are one of the ones whom I would highly recommend. Think about the conversations that you're having with your friends, if you're working or if you're interning, conversations that you're having with other people around you. What is the quality of the conversation that you're having? And because you're so young, the ability to absorb new skills is going to be like a sponge compared to someone who's my age, or someone who's like 10 years my senior, for example. So this is what you should be telling your friends, to let's learn something about even TikTok, for example, right? So a lot of younger people are on TikTok and they're learning to make all these videos. You can even be a specialist in TikTok and say, I'm going to put myself on Fiverr and say, I will create 10 TikTok videos for you for $50. Right? And then you can teach me, for example, how to create a TikTok video, because I have no idea. So that can actually be a skill. And just putting that together, the effort of putting that together to say, I'm going to create 10 TikTok videos for you, and then putting yourself out there, marketing yourself, listing yourself on a Fiverr, approaching me as a potential client. These are all skill sets which builds your confidence, which builds your critical thinking, because you're constantly thinking about, where am I going to find my clients? Where am I going to find my audience? How much am I going to charge this service? So all of this is actually part of the digital skills that I was talking about. So don't just look at it from a technical perspective, but look at it, how am I going to build my soft skills and leadership skills? Because that is the skill of the future. Okay, so next, new future bright. So as I mentioned, and we all know that businesses in the future will move to automation, where and governments will do their best to work with. Okay, so this is basically the part where governments will do their best to work within our planetary boundaries. So we've seen with the COVID-19, in terms of climate change and sustainability, lots of new things have appeared. So, for example, if you look at China, if you look at the geographic, what is it called? The image that you can take from Google Images. So there's this Google image where you can just basically hover over China and see the level of pollution. So before the COVID-19, before everybody was on lockdown, the entire country was covered in smog, for example, because of all the industrialization, industrial activities. But then, the satellite image. And then now that, everything's on lockdown, all of a sudden you see clear skies, and you see consumption going down. You see the airline industry and the travel industry going down. But, there's actually a silver lining in all of this, right? People have to rethink about, the way that they've been consuming, the way that they've been traveling all this while, the industrial activities that they've been involved in all this while. So this is basically the planet asking for help. Why is it that we're getting this virus, for example? So do people actually think about the root cause of how did this virus even start? It is because, due to human activities, that we have encroached old forests, we have encroached jungles, we have encroached other people's we have somebody just joined and I have to click accept. So we have encroached into the wild animals ecosystem, right? And so we are basically we're basically encroaching their home. And so when we do that, we actually don't realize that we've unleashed or released a certain thing that we don't understand what it is, and therefore this has now bitten us back, right? So wild animals that you shouldn't be touching, that you shouldn't be eating, that you shouldn't be part of our food chain, has now suddenly entered our food chain, and therefore it releases and it unleashes all this potential diseases that we shouldn't be getting today. And on top of that, there's an issue of overpopulation. There's too many human beings being on the planet. So what does that mean? Too many human beings that we have to share. So just imagine when you have a family, right? So you have a family of 5 children and your parents, for example. So your parents in this remit basically means the government. So the government sets the rules. Your parents sets the rules. These are my house rules. So in Malaysia, the government will set, these are my rules. This is the license for you to operate. If you perform and if you operate within this framework or within these limitations that I provide to you, then you can become a player. Otherwise, you are going to be put, you're going to be fined, you're going to be put to naughty corner, you're going to be time out. So that's basically how we should be looking at this. So when I mention about how governments in the future going to start rethinking about policies and regulations and going to start allowing businesses to operate within the planetary boundaries, this will really, really change how businesses and industries function in the future. Because if you look at companies, particularly within the fossil fuel industry, like oil and gas, right? So these are one of the industries that causing, one of the top 3 carbon emitters in the world. And so this can no longer be such. And if you look at other industries, for example, the fast fashion industry, and you look at the meat industry, so these are all, trying to feed the human population, and there's so much wastage at the same time, which is completely unmanageable. So these are all actually opportunities, which I'll talk a little bit more when I get to the sustainable developmental goals. And if I'm going too fast, please let me know. Please put a question in the chat box. I'll be happy to answer them right after this. Okay, so just kind of wrapping this session off. These stuff that I've just mentioned will basically cause these major shifts in future industries, right? So think about the supply chains for food. Think about travel. So because, travel is one of the biggest polluter as well and the causes of climate change. And therefore people will now rethink the way how they travel. So if I wanted to go and see Mount Fuji, or if I wanted to go and see, travel to Ireland, for example, maybe there'll be a different way of doing that to experience it. I can use augmented reality. I can be using virtual reality, and I will still be able to experience the magnificence of the beauty of another country without having to physically travel all the way there. So these are, the kinds of ways that we have to really push ourselves in terms of how we think and expand our minds of what is possible, and then think about what are the areas which then I can from today equip myself with, learn about, read about, so that eventually when the opportunity hits, I'm ready for it. So that's what it is, right? So going back to the point where at the beginning, I think I mentioned that 65% of the future jobs have not yet existed today. What are those 65% jobs? It's a lot. And today we're seeing, a lot of people losing their jobs. In America, till today, after the coronavirus, we have 4 million people being displaced out of jobs, out of the traditional jobs. Once we are out of this storm, what would that look like? Will people go back to business as usual? I doubt it. Businesses will change. Businesses will take a long time to pick themselves back up, and a lot of businesses will be pivoting. So are we ready or not by that time? So that's what we need to think about. So now moving on to robotics process automation, I'm going to pass it over to my husband, Chris. Sure. And he will introduce himself. So.
I shall indeed. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm going to try and do this as enthusiastic as my wife did, because I know that she's very passionate about it. So anyways, just a quick introduction. Okay, so my name is Chris. So I'm Pial's husband. I'm really thrilled to be here and talk about a topic which is really close to my heart, which is robotics processing automation. So I'm currently heading up the business for boundaryless automation in Malaysia, and our company specializes in robotics, process automations, project consultants and delivery, as well as training and workshops. So let's jump into, how do I move this on? Sorry, I'm going to try and get to the next slide. Let's talk about what is robotics process automation. So most of you might not have heard about it, but the closest thing to what RPA actually is, and you might be familiar with an application called Zapier. So Zapier is actually a tool which is able to connect applications from one platform to the other by using various steps, right? So RPA is actually an advanced technology that enables computer software to emulate and integrate actions that can be done by human beings, right? We call these bots. They can handle a large amount of volume of repeatable tasks and actions to free up workers' time so that they can actually focus on more valuable work, right? So if you can imagine that you're in a business like HR, for example, where 50% of your time might be spent on administrative tasks, how can we actually automate these tasks so you can actually free up that time to work on more high value work, right? So actually most businesses are always looking for ways how they can increase their productivity. So technologies like RPA facilitate that, and they're actually as efficient as 3 employees able to do the job, right? So the initial investment to actually deploy these bots might be high to get started, but we can see that the average return of investment is much greater than expected in perhaps a 9 to 12 month period, depending on the complexity of some of these integrations. So let's look at some of the facts, right? Because these are actually interesting statistics. I didn't make them up. These are actually done by some research institutions around the world. So according to Forrester Research, by 2020, we will see that 40% of the organizations will deploy some form of RPA, right? So the majority of these organizations are actually mostly in the US and Europe currently. But we are seeing a trend that these are slowly moving to the eastern half of the world. So that's why we're trying to jump into that space where we see that there are companies that are looking for some kind of a solution which will help them in terms of delivering more value to the organization. So just to be clear, there's a big differentiation between RPA and AI, right? So RPA is actually basically copying tasks which already exist in human being processes, and they can help to facilitate artificial intelligence, right? So that's what we see now. So they're very distinguished. So artificial intelligence actually goes by learning, right? And it learns and becomes better over time. And RPA can actually feed some of that data into artificial intelligence. So next, McKinsey Global Institute report actually states that by 2030, automation will drive 75 to 375 million people to reskill and even change occupations. That is actually quite a significant number, right? So the global market size for RPA is expected to reach about 4 billion by 2025. But what we don't see is that we don't have enough talented people that can actually pick up the skills for RPA. Okay, so let me just give you some examples of where RPA can help and where they have been actually implemented across various industries. So I've listed down a few, but I don't want to go through all of them, so you can have a read. But let me just pick out two that I wanted to go through today. So if you look at the first one, which talks about HR, right? So this might be familiar with you in terms of a process, right? So could you imagine that you're an employee for an organization? In most organizations, these processes are still very manual and tedious and require perhaps a few people to complete certain tasks. Now, with the use of RPA bots, we can actually automate some of these existing processes, which then actually eliminate human error and simply getting the job done more faster and efficiently. So that's interesting. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the last one as well, because obviously this is something which is happening currently right now in the world. And there are some clever guys actually in Israel that developed an RPA bot to help in the health industry, right? So with RPA bots in place, it actually helped to reduce some of this lag time and to get crucial patient data into the computer systems, reducing actually 50% of the time that it would take to get this data across, right? So updating the infected patients' records within minutes, thus allowing a fast response in time by the doctors and nurses. So that's a really important one, how RPA can actually contribute in this current situation. So to make it a little bit easier for you, I've mapped out a very simple way of how RPA is actually implemented from end to end, right? Now, it's obviously missing a few stages because it requires a little bit more than just the 4 that we see here, because there's obviously things like acceptance testing, process documentation, and change management, which are part of that. But for the purpose of keeping it simple, let's take a look at how this works. All right, so in the first stage, depending on the complexity of the work, typically a business analyst will work on capturing and documenting the processes, right? They will determine what needs to be automated by a set of criteria. So then if we move on to the second phase, an RPA developer, who's a little bit more technically skilled, will then do the technical mapping from the input data, and they will create an end-to-end workflow. Going into the robotics part, with an outcome of that fully automated process, then you will see that in the data output, once it goes through our bots, it will be able to produce a tool which will be super fast, eliminating errors and freeing up some valuable human time. So this is really important and effective. So who creates these bots, right? So you need to have a software platform that actually that you need to be able to create these on. So there's actually more than three, but I've listed the top three market leaders, right, across the world. So you have UiPath and Blue Prism, who are in general a little bit more user friendly in terms of use and automation anywhere, which requires a little bit more coding skill. So, but having said that, it depends a bit on the organizations and clients, which sometimes have different kind of preference in terms of what automation they require. So now moving into the roles, which are part of RPA. So there are a number of roles that sit under RPA, but the most common ones are the RPA developer and business analysts, program leads, and solution architects. Each role requires its own specific skill set. Now, RPA developers in general, in terms of skills and technical skills, require an average of 2 to 4 years professional experience in programming, mostly in terms of scripting, databases, and application development. But don't worry, there's more, because also you are able to learn this skill, because not everything is technical, right? So I'm personally a fan of UiPath. So they have this amazing academy offering loads of courses, which are actually for free. And you have various role-based programs from beginner to advanced. And besides that, they have an amazing community of RPA talents that love to share their knowledge and experience. So you might think this is very technical, but in fact, UiPath offers a unique program which is called Studio X, and it doesn't require any programming skills. So these are actually things that you can actually go out there right now and pick up, which is really cool. Anyways, guys, I'm going to leave it at that. I hope it was interesting, even if you take away 20% of what I've told you today. But do check out the UiPath Academy. We'll provide you with the resources afterwards. So thanks very much, and I'm going to hand you back over to my wife. Thanks.
Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, so, one of the reasons why I thought this would be a very interesting sharing from Chris is because when you talk about technical programming, etc., usually, girls or women are not so much inclined, right? So when we think about girls in tech, for example, so that less women who are in the software or technology or engineering-based type of industries. So this is a good example of this area being an up-and-coming future work opportunity and trend that women or female should not miss out. So if you are a mom, for example, and you have kids, so you're thinking about, okay, what am I going to ask, or how am I going to nurture skill sets in my kids? What kind of skill sets? So you can always start from the basics. And then you can always, share with them a bit more about the future. So we talk about AI, we talk about data analytics. These three areas are lacking of women professionals, and hopefully we will be able to push more female talent into this space as well. So that was UiPath, and that was Chris's stuff. So I'm going to move on to the third part of this presentation, which is where is the future of businesses and industries going to be heading? So I actually believe that this is actually the answer. So if you look into these 17 sustainable developmental goals, from no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, etc. These are all areas whereby there's going to be a lot more of emphasis and focus put on it. And for every single company, right, from a marine company, from oil and gas company. So if you work for an oil and gas company, for example, you have to really start thinking about managing your waste. You need to start thinking about, how your business activities impact life below water, life on land. You have to think about, how do you embed in your business model responsible consumption and production. So the problem is with sustainability is that it is such a big word, right? Like IR 4.0, for example, in Malaysia, we've got all these big jargons, big words, and people don't really understand what it means. So, what I would really push you all to learn more about is read and gain more knowledge within this sector, because then you have the way how you think. For example, when even if you are an engineer, even if you're a salesperson, even if you're a BD person, even if you're marketing, this goals should be constantly embedded in your thinking and your thought processes, because that's how the future of businesses is going to head towards. People who are going to buy from you are going to look at how responsible are you within ensuring that the entire supply chain that you're in is sustainable. So these are the areas where you can already start thinking about. And so, for example, if you are an entrepreneur, you are a solopreneur, you're a freelancer, so this seems to be a bit like really big, right? Big stuff. How do I then incorporate or embed this in my business activity? If I'm a small F&B player, if I'm if I sell, I have a stall at the Pasar Ramadan, for example, how do I embed this within my thinking, right? So this is so relevant. Like, when I'm looking at this, like I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is the answer. So if I'm operating a Pasar Ramadan, I would look at number 12 and look at responsible consumption and production. Instead of doing business as usual by providing my packaging, my plastics packaging, etc., to sell my food, how can I think of a better way, of a more innovative way to actually sell my food? How can I package my food? How can I ensure that the quantity is just enough that it would limit the amount of wastage? How can I ensure that create a system that maybe people can pre-order from my stall at the Pasar Ramadan before I even start to cook, right? So for example, I'm going to cook for 100 people, but then I end up only selling 80. So I have an excess of 20 amount to feed 20 people, for example, right? So how do I reduce this wastage? By allowing people to pre-order, by thinking about how can I ensure that whatever it is that I'm going to be producing is just enough. So this is the example. So I'm going to bring it back to myself now, right? How this is relevant to me. So in my work as head of operations at this think tank, and also launching myself as a coach, what are the proponents of these 17 goals that actually covers the work that I do? So these are the areas that covers the work that I do. Good health and well-being. So I'm promoting good health and well-being for all societal shapers, or for all young female talent, because you need to understand, in order for you to be a good, confident female young leader or talent, either within this public sector space or within politics or within business, you must have the stamina, you must have the energy. You cannot be overweight, and you cannot be constantly sick. You have to have the energy and stamina in order to lead others, in order to be aspirational and inspirational to other people. So you must really take care of yourself. So this is something which I really push for. Quality education. And again, we talk about, how people in Malaysia, or looking at our politicians, etc., not having enough knowledge, or not surrounding themselves with enough intellectual people to give them good advice. So we need to push for better quality education. We talk about gender equality. That's what I'm pushing for, right? For more females in the public sector space. Then I talk about decent work and economic growth, because one of the areas, why is it that I'm focusing on female talent within the public sector space, is because I believe a lot of the social injustices that's happening today is due to a weak system that we have. Weak institutions, weak politicians, weak people within the government sector. So we need to help them. We need to support them. We need to to build them, not put them down. So how do we do that? But you also have a lot of young talent from everywhere. Where are they? Why are we not pushing them to hold more positions in the cabinet, for example? So only when you are in the system that you can make rules and regulations and policies on decent work and economic growth, on thinking about sustainable cities and communities, thinking about peace, justice. So I just mentioned earlier, right? Number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So because I know that this is what, like 10 out of the 17, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so I cover like 10 out of the 17 goals. I know that what I'm doing is the right thing. I know that I'm on the right path. I know that this career or this, path that I'm trying to build myself, I am moving towards the right way, because I believe that the future is going to be in this right way. So if whatever business that you're in, think about these goals and think how your current business covers these goals. If you are a fashion company, if you are a retail, F&B, a manufacturing, an electronics, if you are a Grab driver, anything that you do, just think about this, right? And think about the connection. And think about how can you package your brand, your service in a way that is pushing for these goals. So that is one of the things which I was really excited when I was preparing this slide, because many people are worried about the future of jobs. And I say, if you familiarize yourself and increase your knowledge and level of depth and understanding about the sustainable developmental goals, you will not have to worry about not having a job in the future. You will have a job for sure. So then and Nash, yesterday in the webinar that I attended, there was a question that people asked about how to unlearn, because there's this process of people learning, unlearning, and relearning. So someone asked this question of how do I unlearn? So the answer to that for me is to continuously learn. So you cannot stop learning. As long as you continuously learn, you will eventually make it a habit that you are unlearning, because as long as you are increasing the level of knowledge that you have, that means a lot of your old lenses, a lot of your old beliefs, old narratives will now then be replaced with this new narratives, because you just learned something. You just read a new book, and this new book has given you a new perspective. That's you learning, and that's you unlearning. So that's like one of the questions which I wanted to continuously motivate you. And then now thinking about what is it that I need to learn? What are the things which I need to learn? So everything that we've covered in this entire webinar, we've actually come up with a list of recommended resources. So I don't want to bombard you with like too much stuff, but I think 2 things to think about while being in this in the situation that we are in today is on food supply and on healthcare. So food supply chains, ensuring that we have a steady and stable supply of good quality food for everybody here, and also, the responses and preparedness of our healthcare system, not just in Malaysia, but ASEAN in general. How do we ensure that our healthcare system will not be overwhelmed? How do we ensure that, we have enough healthcare professionals, enough healthcare academicians who can give us good advice and build on providing good and free public health access to everyone, because everyone deserves it, right? So I put some recommended readings. So I put one on agricultural economy, because that's where you can understand about food sustainability. So really be picky about the things that you're going to read and who you're reading it from, right? So you don't want to pick an article that was produced by a blogger that got posted on social media, right? You want to, read articles and journals that have facts to back up the arguments, and then take on this knowledge and have a discussion with a couple of your friends about the food supply chain. Talk with them about the sustainability of our healthcare systems, for example. So make sure that you have somebody to brainstorm or pick their brains or bounce off ideas, because that's the only way that you're going to create a habit in your mind to think fast on your feet, to be able to act rather than be reactive, taking proactive actions, because you already know, you have equipped yourself with all this knowledge. So I think that's where I'm going to stop, and I'm going to open it up to question and answer time. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put it here or onto the chat, and I'll see if there's one. How can we get more young people to think like leaders? So this is where it is. People like, for example, Noor Zabidi here, right? Share the message with your friends. We're going to be having a recording. Share it with your friends. Get more people to get more involved in terms of challenging the way that they think and what are the kinds of information that they consume. So it is so easy to be consumed by all sorts of information out there because it is just an information overload century, right? And so especially on social media, you can spend hours on social media. So you have to develop certain discipline to say, okay, I've done 2 hours now on social media, on my Instagram, on my TikToking, etc., and now I'm going to spend another good hour of doing something else. So I think, thank you so much. Thank you for joining. But yes, so the only way how we can develop future leaders is you have to find people who are passionate about it. So, when I spoke to Nash about this also before, and I said, if I was going to give myself advice 10 years, myself 10 or 15 years ago, what would I say to myself? So whatever that I'm creating today, putting out there as a resource and trying to value add to the younger people, these are the things which I wished I had someone to tell me this, someone to support me, someone who could be like a mentor or like a coach, someone whom I can trust to know that I'm this person is objective and has a bigger purpose that's driving. So this is a community that I want to build, right? And it's just not going to be me by myself. It'll be, Nash, my husband, all the other women whom you eventually see. And, the idea is to get a group of them together so then they will become resources for the younger generation. And then you guys will feel more supported. So we talk about, why is there not enough women in politics? Why are there not enough women in cabinet? What is the pathway? If I wanted to become a politician, how do I do that? How do I become one? If I wanted to be part of the government in cabinet and parliament, how do I do that? I have no idea. So I'm sure many younger people out there are also in the same dilemma, and they don't know. So how do I do this? So these are the kinds of information that we would like to share and get more experts to come in and share their expertise to understand the Malaysian constitution, to understand how Malaysian parliament politics works, so that when you are equipped with this knowledge, then you know how the system works, and we will work according to the system, but not just be contented with the system. We need to fight, challenge, and better the system so that we can be better, right, in general. And then this is not just for us, but within this region. So interesting when we talk about global population. We are now a population of about 7.8 billion people. In the next 30 years, by 2050, we're going to be a 10 billion population. And out of the whole world, more than 50% of that 10 billion people will be focused in this region. That means from China, India, plus Southeast Asia, South Asia, etc., there'll be 6 billion people here. That is a crowded space, y'all. That is like literally people living with one another. And on top of that, we have to share, right? So even teaching my kids to share is like a nightmare, right? Everyone's constantly fighting over things and all that. So imagine, we have to share not just like basic resources like water, electricity, energy, etc. We have to share the air that we breathe. You know that in China, pollution kills 1.1 million Chinese people every year. And you compare that to the COVID deaths today. And because there's like less and lesser pollution today, because all activities have been halted, literally China has been like, half of the 1.1 million is probably spared because they're not breathing bad air. So what does that mean? Are people thinking about this? So these are the kind of things which I hope you will share with your friends, Noor Zabidi, get them to read more stuff. Feel free to join the Societal Shapers group and ask questions and spread the message. Okay? So I think that's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much, Nash and Noor, for staying all the way till the end of the webinar. Yes, and thanks, Rosh, for helping to moderate. Yes, and I look forward to connecting with you guys in person. All right, then take care now.
Guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
thank you so much for listening in. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your friends. Be sure to tune in to the next episode, and to find out how to be part of Societal Shapers, head to www.plcadilla.com and check out our coaching programs. Catch you soon!